So we're very glad to have Stacy Rubin here today. Stacy Rubin is a commissioner in the Department of Public Utilities. She was appointed in April 2023, making her return to the agency. And prior to that appointment, she was the Vice President for Environmental Justice at Conservation Law Foundation. And many of us know her from her appointment there, where she partnered with residents of historically marginalized communities to address challenges regarding transportation and climate justice, zero waste, and lead poisoning prevention in 6 New England states. She embedded environmental justice throughout the CLF work and achieved victories using a community lawyering approach to improve transit operations and prevent energy and waste facilities in low-income communities and communities of color. Rubin successfully advocated for environmental justice laws in Massachusetts and in Vermont. So we're really glad to have her here. We sent Stacy some questions ahead of time generated from our legislative team, and she can answer some of those as she wishes. After she's finished giving her presentation, we'll have questions and answers. And she'd really like to have this more of a discussion and conversation between all of us here and those of you on Zoom. So we will be taking questions and generating conversation with her. So welcome, Stacy, and thanks so much for coming.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me on Zoom? And then I have to look to our moderator to make sure that there's heads nodding.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. And can you hear me in the room?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic, that's great. So hello, I really appreciate the invitation to be here today. So again, I'm Stacy Rubin, and I've been a commissioner at the Department of Public Utilities, or DPU, for about 11 months now, which feels like the time has flown by. Some days it feels like I've been there for years. Other days it feels like I just got there. So depends on what's going on that moment. So I am an attorney. I have a career starting with a community-based organization called Alternatives for Community and Environment, or ACE, doing the community lawyering work, representing community groups who are very concerned about fossil fuel infrastructure in their neighborhoods. So I spend my early part of my career fighting against dual oil and gas power plants being sited in communities of color and low-income communities. Left that job because I was looking for something that was a little bit more of a predictable schedule, and ended up at the Department of Public Utilities. And I wasn't quite sure that I was going to enjoy that opportunity, and it turned out that I was pretty much the only person in the agency who brought the perspective that I did, of really wanting to make sure that community voices were part of decision making. I was a regular, a proponent of open government. I really believe that we got to be transparent. I was overseeing at that time as a hearing officer, the public records law implementation at the agency, spent a lot of time on distributed generation matters. And then I left there to go to Conservation Law Foundation, where I got to do all sorts of really interesting climate justice work throughout New England. And just to be transparent, I wasn't looking to leave that job. This opportunity popped up, and I'm so thrilled with the Healy Driscoll administration for the opportunity. So I figured I would just go through a couple of the Department of Public Utilities priorities, give you a little bit of a background for who we are. I get the sense that some of you know the DPU really well, and that there are others who may know less about us. Is that an accurate? Okay, great. So I'll do sort of the overview of what the agency does, what our priorities are, and then I'll go through the questions that you asked and attempt to respond to them, and then we'll just open it up. But also feel free to just interject if you have a question along the way. So the Department of Public Utilities is one of the oldest public utility commissions in the country, and we oversee transportation safety, pipeline safety, and all things relating to investor-owned water, gas, and electric utilities. So if there is a small privately owned water company that wants to change their rates, they have to come to our agency to seek review. If there is, how many of you have ever ridden in a duck boat? Wow, that's a lot of hands. Okay, so you know what a duck boat is, that sightseeing vehicle that starts on land, goes into the water. So we actually have inspectors who inspect those vehicles before they go out. So if there's a regional transit authority bus accident, our folks are in charge of going to investigate before any of the motor coaches go on the road for the first time. And then on a regular basis, we are inspecting them. I've had the privilege of standing under a massive motor coach bus that seats 65 people, and I know a little bit, not a lot. That's why we have experts that I work with who know about the safety of these vehicles. We regulate transportation network companies, so Uber and Lyft. So we are responsible for doing a secondary background check for all of the drivers, complaint procedures. We license the companies that run them. And then with electric and gas utilities, you can imagine we are overseeing their rate structures, the programs that they are offering. So it's a pretty wide variety of work that we do. And I like to think that our agency touches everyone in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If you have a municipal light plant, we're not in charge of your rates. But there's a very small bit of oversight that we have around some interest rate issues. But really, I think that so much of what we do from a safety perspective, from a rates perspective, it's what we call our daily bread and butter. So we have a 3-member commission, which is the decision-making body of the agency. So I'm one of the 3. We have one of us is designated the chair, which is Chair Jamie Van Nostrand. Commissioner Frazier has been on the job for about 6.5 years now. And Chair Van Nostrand and I joined about the same time last spring with the Healy administration. So one of our main priorities is transparency. So I have worked at the Department of Public Utilities as an attorney, as a hearing officer. Now I'm back as a commissioner. And I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what the agency does. So we're trying to improve that. We're in the process of upgrading our website. Our hope is to be able to post videos about what we do and just be much more clear and transparent about how we do the work. The commission itself didn't typically go to public hearings. It was rare to see all 3 commissioners in one place at any one time. Now this commission is regularly traveling to public hearings where you'll see all of us together. We are accountable to the public. We are working for the public. It's important that we're out there in the public. So we're really trying to do that, and obviously complying with the public record laws and making sure that whenever people are asking for materials, we are providing them. And we're trying to put more just on the website so we can direct people there. We're also trying to be better about having multilingual materials. So many people in the Commonwealth are limited English proficient speakers, and we need to be able to communicate in more than just English. So that is something that we're really working on. So just in terms of transparency, we're trying to not just show up in a room and say, hey, we're here as a decision-making body. We're also just trying to be clear on what our priorities are and share openly, what it is that we're thinking. A second priority is clean energy. So I think one of the main reasons that I was asked to be in this role is because I have a long commitment throughout my career of really promoting renewable energy, understanding what are the impacts of our historical energy systems. And we now have a series of laws in Massachusetts that requires us to move toward a clean energy future. So we are working on how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in all of our investor-owned utilities? How do we think about that in the transportation context? As I mentioned, we do a lot of transportation-related work. So we're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions beyond just the utility context. We have a new set of mission priorities that was established by our state legislature. So in 2021, I like to call it the roadmap law. Some people call it the 2021 climate law, but that law gave DPU an expanded mission. So historically, the DPU is focused on safety, reliability, affordability, and now we also have to consider greenhouse gas emissions reductions and equity. And I think that that's a perfect set of factors to balance. It's got to be something that the agency is looking at for all of our decisions. So yes,
I want you to know that this group here did a lot of work to get the roadmap passed. And that's what we call it too, the roadmap.
Yes, thank you so much for your work to get that passed. So I was not a government worker at that time. I was an attorney working at Conservation Law Foundation, also putting in a lot of work. And I remember how difficult it was to get that roadmap law over the finish line. And it was, I mean, I don't even know how many sections, 110 sections of that law covering so many different issues. And it was because of advocacy from Elders Climate Action and so many other wonderful advocates of that law that passed over the finish line. So thank you. Yeah, those laws don't get passed without people in this room and others. So excellent point. So my job now is to be implementing that to the best extent that we can. Obviously, that law applies to more than the Department of Public Utilities, but the pieces that apply to us are really important and meaningful and central to what we're doing. So again, thinking about greenhouse gas emissions and equity in everything that we do, in addition to the traditional factors, that's now something that we're really focused on. So as we are moving away from fossil fuels, we are seeing a need for more electrification, and that is going to require an increased amount of electric load. Our electric systems in particular were set up to have a power plant on one end generating electricity, typically powered by fossil fuels, in order for us in a library like this or our homes to be able to flip a switch and have the lights turn on. And now we're talking about bi-directional two-way power flow where we can have a solar panel on this building. I don't know if there is, I don't think so, okay. But theoretically, there could be solar panels on this building generating electricity and sending power in multiple directions. We're aware that, improving our electric grid infrastructure has major cost implications. So we're very focused on affordability. So one of the big priorities for us, we opened up a docket just a couple weeks ago in early January. We call it the energy burden docket. So the percentage of people's discretionary income that goes to pay their energy bills can be measured, right? So there's a lot of studies out there, including the American Council on Energy Efficiency, ACEEE. They say that a 6% of your gross income should be spent on utility bills or less. Anything higher than 6% is generally speaking to be a high energy burdened household. So there are other states that set up utility bills so that, based on your income, you're capped at how much you're spending. So that only 6% perhaps of your income is going to your energy bills. So we put out about 30 questions to the public in early January, and we collected many, many comments over the last 2 months, getting ideas and responses to our questions about, is that something we should consider here? Should we protect the utilities against shutting off people's power based on certain criteria? Right now, you cannot have your power turned off during the winter months between November 15th and March 15th. So we asked, should we expand that time? Yes.
Our house had oil, but we're off that now, but oil is not a utility.
Correct.
So do you deal with it at all?
We have a small role to play in oil. So I understand that there are many oil powered homes in the Commonwealth. There are LIHEAP, for example, there are federal funds to help people who are, income eligible to pay for oil heat. Our energy efficiency programs are designed to help people transition away from older fossil fuel systems to newer ones. So our energy efficiency programs are, aimed at trying to do that. And yeah, we need to move off delivered fuels, certainly, in order to get where we need to go. Yeah, it's a great question. So our energy burden docket, which for those of you that are into the weeds, it's DPU 24-15. You can see the comments that are posted there. Our next step in that proceeding is we're going to convene people together. We're going to sort of have kind of a set of proposals and get feedback from the public on those proposals. So stay tuned for that. We are looking to make some progress as soon as we can in that docket because affordability is really key before we do anything else. And again, perhaps different shut-off moratorium structures or other forms of assistance to people who are struggling with their utility bills is something that we're looking into. A fourth priority that I want to talk about is equity and environmental justice. So you heard in my biography that environmental justice is so important to me. It's been a hallmark of what I've been doing for all of the years since I've been out of law school and even before that. We need to do better about making sure that there are ways for people to participate and influence what we're doing at the DPU. And environmental justice is all about looking historically at who is most burdened by our systems, our energy systems, and how can we ensure that there's an equitable distribution of the clean energy future that I think everybody in this room is looking forward to. So we are hiring a director of environmental justice and public participation. That person will start at the end of this month. So I'm really excited that we will have somebody whose entire position is focused on increasing public participation opportunities at our agency and helping each of our divisions think through what does it mean to integrate environmental justice into our daily work. So we also know that there are other environmental agencies throughout the Commonwealth who are similarly getting a person devoted to environmental justice and equity. And all of those people across the agencies will be meeting, well, they are meeting regularly. And as we bring on more people, they'll be meeting and making sure that we have best practices for doing public hearings and figuring out better ways to get the word out. So for example, this afternoon, we're having a virtual public hearing on electric sector modernization plans that the electric companies have filed, planning out for our future grid. And that's something that we are hoping to see people at. I know we had some wonderful participation from Tina at our hearing yesterday, so we have another one today. Tonight, there is an in-person public hearing in Everett about some contracts that the gas distribution companies have filed with the Everett Marine Terminal. So the Everett Marine Terminal is a liquefied natural gas facility that provides product when there is potentially a constraint with our natural gas systems. So right now, we've got a hearing tonight in person where we will offer multilingual conversation to hear from the public about any comments regarding the Everett Marine Terminal gas supply contracts. So we're really looking at increasing the opportunities for the public to tell us what they think and for us to be responding to those public comments. So with that, I'm going to start to get into your questions. So one limitation as to how much I can say is that if we have an open proceeding, I cannot discuss substantively what is going on in that proceeding unless every party to that case is present in the conversation. So we have a lot of cases that you have asked questions about that are open and pending, and we don't have all of the parties in the room today. So I'm not going to be able to answer, I think, with satisfaction to you, all of your questions. So our rules legally spell out that we cannot have ex parte communications. We have to make sure that everyone has an equal chance at influencing the agency. So one of your questions was about our future of gas order, or DPU 20-80. How many of people know what I'm talking about when I say that? Okay, so let me do some background because that was less than half the hands. And I didn't see on Zoom, but I'm assuming not everybody raised their hand. Good assumption, okay. So I would say one of the biggest decisions that we have issued since I have been on the commission is about the future of natural gas. So more than 3 years ago, the Attorney General's office asked the Department of Public Utilities to have a plan. What happens with natural gas in the future? If we're looking to implement the Roadmap Law, the Global Warming Solutions Act, all of our climate laws in Massachusetts, can we do it in a way that thinks about what is the role of natural gas? So we issued a decision in December of 2023, and we outlined a strategy to guide the evolution of the natural gas industry. So our solution really focuses on helping the Commonwealth meet our greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So we talked about the need to electrify our heating systems. So getting people to use heat pumps. How many of you have a heat pump in your home? Interesting, nice. Are people happy with their heat pumps?
Very, very.
Yeah, I see a not so much. Do you want to share about that?
Well, this winter, when the temperature went to 20, our heat pumps weren't adequate.
Do you have the new technology or the
It's
old?
brand new.
Oh,
Interesting. Not every system is equal. I think, there's opportunities to do better education for the contractors that are coming out through the energy efficiency programs to talk and educate the public about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that we have a great system. We love the contractor. They do great maintenance. But their explanation of how to make it work efficiently, especially at low temperatures, was really lacking. We had to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
Now that we figured it out, it works pretty well.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, do you want to share?
Yeah, if you talk about heat pumps a little more, could you talk about the hybrid notion of whether the hybrid notion is adequate? Or, because everything I've seen is that heat pumps, cold climate heat pumps work regardless of the temperature, and I'm tired of seeing misinformation out there about the fact that they don't work. And I think a lot of it's contractor information, contractor training, your point of operation.
Yeah.
How to work.
They had the cutover. We have a hybrid system and they said, set it at 40. And I said, no, and I switched it to 25.
Okay.
But they didn't think that was a good idea.
but hybrid's only financial. It's just a financial difference because it's cheaper on gas. So we have oil. It doesn't make sense for a hybrid system.
Yeah, so I think we're still learning on heat pumps in Massachusetts. So I think they're a fantastic technology. I have them in my house and love how much comfort it's added for us. So the hybrid option, so what that means is that some people who have a natural gas system would keep their natural gas heating system and essentially treat that as the backup. Whereas, generally most of the year you would use the heat pump for heating or cooling. So it's a much more efficient technology for homes. And the concept is that if you do hybrid, that you keep the gas system as a backup, or I guess if you have the oil system, you can keep that, although most people who are doing hybrid are keeping their gas systems and not the oil. So there are open questions before the agency about whether hybrid heating systems are the way to go. So I can't tell you where we are going, but I can tell you there are active evaluations of energy efficiency programs that looked at hybrid heating systems. So I would expect that in the next 3-year energy efficiency plan, which comes before our agency this October, and a decision will be made about this time in 2025, we'll say more about hybrid heating systems. So the future of gas order, or I like to call it our beyond gas order, really outlined a plan to electrify as many homes as we can. We do recognize that there are some particularly industrial sectors that are going to be difficult to electrify. So we did preserve the opportunity for a customer themselves to choose to have a contract. Someone trying to jump in.
Yeah. Need to get someone.
While we're waiting, can I just say this? I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but a friend of mine who just had a heat pump system put in, found that when the temperature got very cold last month, that the system was inadequate, but he insisted that the company come back and fix it, and they did for free. And they're putting in, the design was not optimal. And
Right, no, they came back and they, at their expense, put in more thermostats to better regulate each of the heat pumps, because they weren't working in concert the way we had been led to believe. And the other problem was, each time a new crew came out, they gave us totally conflicting information.
Yep.
And ours is a Mitsubishi, I think. And they finally sent somebody from Mitsubishi who basically said, a lot of the information that is out there is not accurate. They're really not going to keep houses warm below 20 degrees. If they say they're supposed to keep you warm to -13, but.
Mitsubishi said that?
Yeah,
They
Yeah.
do work below 20 degrees, lots of them.
well, it hasn't worked in our case.
Right, that's, yeah.
I mean, I've had the experience where it has worked. It's been great for us. I will say though, there's a need for better education all around and we understand that. So that's certainly a next step. We get that. So just to say, our Beyond Gas order also talked about the fact that if a utility company is coming to us with a new proposed investment, that they need to demonstrate that there are no non-gas pipeline alternatives available before seeking to recover the costs. We also indicated that the natural gas companies can no longer get cost recovery or have ratepayers fund the promotion and marketing of natural gas. And the distribution companies are now going to be required to file what we're calling these climate compliance plans every 5 years to say how their operating strategies are aligned with the Commonwealth's climate laws. So we're excited about where that's going. I will say, I know there's a question or a series of questions that one of you had submitted in detail about that order. And the gas distribution companies did file a motion for clarification and reconsideration that is pending before us. So I really can't talk about, what is pending before us, but I can say there's going to be some more decisions in the 2080 docket, and stay tuned. So I wanted to make sure I touched on that. Another question that some of you asked is, where is Mass Save going? So Mass Save is our statewide energy efficiency programs. So all of us on our utility bills, there's a lot of detail on your bill if you ever actually pay attention to it. There's a systems benefits charge on your bill, and it's fractions of $1 that we are paying to go into an energy efficiency fund. So everybody can call up Mass Save and say, I want an energy efficiency audit of my home. If you haven't done that, I highly encourage you to do it. So the audit itself is no cost, and then typically there's a series of recommended actions for you to implement. So those actions usually come with a cost. So very low income customers are covered 100% of the cost. And then if you're above that income threshold, there's usually a sharing so that there's an upfront cost for the renter or homeowner, and then the rest of it comes out of that pool that we're all paying into. So every 3 years, our agency reviews the energy efficiency programs for a 3-year forward-going basis. So right now, we're at the tail end. 2024 is the end of the current 3-year plan, and we're going to get the next 3-year plan this October at the agency for review. So where is it going? I can't say for sure because we have to go through the whole process and we have to make sure we hear from everybody. I will say that the roadmap law sets specific requirements. It sort of allows there to be energy efficiency goals that are set up. So there's a specific amount of carbon dioxide emissions reductions that are specified for the plan. So just last week, Secretary Tepper of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs told all of the utility companies and program administrators to sort of do 2 modeling scenarios in advance of filing their next plans with us. So she asked for a 1 million metric ton equivalent reduction every single year of greenhouse gas emissions, with a total budget for these programs not to exceed $5 billion. That is a lot of money, $5 billion. And she also was looking for a specific greenhouse gas emissions reduction scenario, looking at those improvements through 2030. So that information is currently being developed by the program administrators of the energy efficiency plans. How can you influence what's in those plans? So those plans are really important. There's decarbonization is part of them. So getting more heat pumps throughout the Commonwealth, as well as money that goes to helping us retrofit our homes and businesses to make them more energy efficient. So there's something called the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. And I know there was already a comment letter, probably many, that Elders Climate Action has submitted to that body. The next meeting, I think, is on March 20th. And you can go there. There's always a public comment period during that meeting. I believe that meeting is 1 to 4 I can check. But if you have specific comments, content that you really want to see in the energy efficiency plan, I would go to the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council and tell them what you think. It's better to get it in the plans early. And then once they come to our agency for review, we have 4 months to make a decision, and we'll have public hearings, and we'll make sure that there's an opportunity for people to weigh in. So you're welcome to do so later this fall, but the sooner you do it, the better it is. Yes.
To what extent can the DPU revise a 3-year plan that is referred to it by the utility when they apply for its approval? And do we need to raise those issues before the EAC in order to raise them before the DPU?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the DPU has historically and has the opportunity to revise the plans. We are a government agency, and we have to make sure that there's a legal process that we're following. So 4 months to do all of the work that we need to do is an enormous constraint. So we typically try to focus on the issues that there's a lot of tension, where there's disagreement amongst the parties. So if there's an ability to build some consensus amongst the utilities, the environmental community, the labor community, the commercial industrial, if that consensus can be built sooner, that helps the process when it comes before our agency. But the DPU historically has altered those 3-year plans based on the review period. So it's definitely possible. I will say, I know my first experience at the DPU was as an attorney representing the Green Justice Coalition on energy efficiency plans, the first 3-year plans in 2009. So I've been at this for a little while on energy efficiency, and I know one issue that I think is likely to come up this year is around renters. And there's, historically, you need your landlord's permission to do energy efficient improvements other than kind of changing out the light bulbs and maybe putting low flow aerators on your faucets for the water. But to do more significant investments that are really going to lower utility bills requires landlord approval. And some landlords are great and some are not responsive or not willing to put in the investment. So I think that issues around renters are going to come up. I expect the decarbonization issue and how do we provide significant investments or incentives for heat pumps are going to come up. And are we doing enough to get the greenhouse gas emission savings that we need to contribute to the climate goals? I think all of that is likely to happen. But I do encourage you to spend the time in the next couple of months trying to influence that Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. They typically put together a resolution that is agreed to by the full council with recommendations to our agency. So it's a good time now to be thinking about this.
Yeah, I have a sort of a bigger picture question related to this same topic,
Sure.
which is about, it's 2 things, and I think they go together. One is about resolving the sort of tension that's in all this between community input and the urgency of the problem, and how you think about that. And the other one is about how to get community input earlier in the process, because I think often there's this, somebody comes up, does all this work to put together a big proposal, and then you get the community input, and it's too late to really influence the proposal. And I think those go together in the sense that making things faster is easier to make happen if you get the community input earlier. But can you talk about how those pieces fit together?
Absolutely. I love this comment because this comes up all the time in my work. So I'm going to pivot away from energy efficiency for a moment to talk about the siting of energy infrastructure. So there is a statewide commission on energy infrastructure siting and permitting, which includes, I think it's 43 members that are making recommendations to the legislature right now, or well, they're making recommendations to the governor, which hopefully will influence legislation that may pass as soon as this summer. So there's that commission. There is an interagency task force that I sit on to support that work. And then there's a group of lawyers who've been doing siting work for a long time. So an executive order from Governor Healy says that commission needs to send recommendations by March 31st, less than 3 weeks. We're working very hard, but the goal is how do we decrease the amount of time it takes to site clean energy infrastructure and think about poles and wires and upgrading our electric grid to allow for more heat pumps and electric vehicles and things that we think are very good. So how to do it faster, how to make sure that there is community input that is meaningful, and then how to ensure that there is an equitable distribution of the benefits of clean energy. So those 3 items, some people say they're in tension. I think you can do all 3 of those things at the same time, and I think that early involvement in a process is the best way to do it. So there is the Commission on Clean Energy Infrastructure Siting and Permitting is looking into what is a pre-filing process. So potentially before a utility company or a large battery energy storage company wants to site, they have to talk to people who are impacted. That includes the municipality, that includes people who live next door, that includes people who might be impacted by the trucks driving to and from, or might hear construction noise. So the idea is the earlier those conversations happen, the better you can sort of have everybody try to work together towards some consensus. It may not always work. But I do think earlier engagement always leads to a more efficient and better outcome. Even though there's still likely to be some people disappointed, I think the early conversations are huge. So that is an active conversation happening in the siting and permitting context right now. And I think it happens in the energy efficiency context because there's all this process that happens with the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council before things come to the DP. Hope I'm not reading a lot of acronyms.
I'd like to interject for 1 second. There's over 40 folks on Zoom, who I'm sure some of whom have questions for Stacy Rubin. I'm wondering if they can raise their hand, and I don't know if you can see the raise hand function, but I think that would be good to give the Zoom folks a chance to ask questions.
You can see the raised hands. So it's almost 10 of 1. Yeah. And thank you, Arnie, for bringing that to our attention. So Roger can see the raised hand function on the computer.
Let's see, Arnie actually can see it a little bit better than what I'm set up for. So Arnie,
I can see it, yeah. I see John Milkeljohn. You're the one on the left who, from my perspective, who's got your hand up.
Yes, can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Commissioner Rubin, I have a question about the limit on distributed power from any one site being allowed to interconnect with a grid. We have a situation where we have 15 kilowatts of distributed power on our property, on our home, but only 10 kilowatts of that 15 kilowatts is interconnected to the grid because we're not allowed under the current regulations, which I think are in the process of changing. We aren't allowed to use that last 5 kilowatts. So our last 5 kilowatt system, which we put up most recently, about 2 years ago, we haven't been able to use the full capacity of it because the house itself can't use all of that 5 kilowatts all the time. So this has been a problem for us. My understanding is the DPW is in the process of changing that cap and moving it, I don't know to what, 15, 20, 25 kilowatt capacity and it from any one site can be interconnected with the grid. Can you talk about that, about what that new capacity will be and when we will be able to do the interconnection?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you have solar panels, I assume, on your home?
Correct.
Or somewhere on your property? Yes. So I don't know if if you're participating in the net metering program or there's something called the SMART program.
Yeah, it's net metering.
Net metering, okay, great. So in Massachusetts, we have net metering program, which allows people to have solar on their home, and to any power that's not being used by their home, they can essentially send that power to the grid and then get credit for generating that clean energy. So we just issued a decision just a couple of weeks ago that implement a portion of the roadmap law that changes the caps. So that's one thing. So there are now cap exempt facilities at a different level that can now start to participate and take service under the net metering tariff. There are additional changes that the 2022 climate law passed that has further implications for the net metering laws. So what we are working to do right now is to get another round of proposed regulations that implement the 2022 law out for public comment. There's a process that we legally have to go through, and then those changes will be final. So again, we just issued an order a couple of weeks ago talking about that. And then there's more in the works. Sorry, some of this is pretty detailed, but there is something called the single parcel rule, which limits the number of solar facilities on a property. And we will be issuing a decision shortly that talks about some potential changes to the single parcel rule. So more to come, and I can get you, I think it's DPU 21-100 is the order that we just issued on net metering. That might be helpful for you, John.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Do you have a sense of the timeline of when a situation like ours could interconnect? Would it be a year, 6 months? Any guess?
It would be hard for me to know without knowing more specifics, but I'm happy to have, I've got somebody whose job at my agency is to answer these questions. So I'm happy to have that person follow up with you if I can get your contact information.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll give her your email, John.
Oh, thank you,
Okay,
Gina. Appreciate that.
Michael?
Arnie, can we go take turns? We're gonna take a question from the room and then we'll go back to Zoom, okay?
Okay.
Okay, we have, Roger, you have a question?
Yeah, just a question on siting and permitting for solar. Who's responsible for industrial scale solar? Who's responsible for siting for rooftop at various levels, local, statewide, siting board? I get a little confused about that. Can you clarify that?
Yes, so it's a great question. I think a lot of that is potentially in flux right now with these recommendations that are going to Governor Healy at the end of the month. So right now, there's a state board called the Energy Facility Siting Board, and they would review a solar facility that's 100 megawatts or greater. There's not a lot of room in land area in Massachusetts to host such a large solar facility. So generally speaking, most of the larger scale ones we see are not at the 100 megawatt level. So usually it's local municipalities through their zoning code that are taking a look. So a lot of these bigger solar facilities and battery energy storage facilities are usually dealt with at the municipal level, though that is potentially going to change with some legislation this year. There's some discussion about having one consolidated local permit and then one consolidated state permit. And we're trying to recommend what size of a facility might bump something from one place to the other. So it's a great question that is being debated vigorously right now.
Okay, Arnie, you want to choose someone from Zoom?
Yeah, Michael.
Hey, thank you, Commissioner. Can you say something without going into any specific case, but can you tell us something about the elements of the equation that the DPU uses in establishing rates for offshore wind power?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. So generally, offshore wind is there's a supply component of our electric bill, and that is dealt with through the ISO New England, or the independent system operator, and we don't have a say in those supply rates. So we're really focusing on the distribution portion. So that's where the Department of Public Utilities comes into play. And offshore wind is an incredibly important piece of the clean energy transition in Massachusetts. And obviously we're big proponents of that. So the DPU's role with offshore wind in particular is mostly focused on looking at the procurement, making sure that there's a procurement process and that the contracts established between the distribution companies and the offshore wind developers meet certain legal requirements. And then that would go into the supply. So we are in the process, or not in the process, we're expecting to see some contracts come before our agencies later this year for review on offshore wind.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
So can you speak about batteries? There's been in Acton, we have this big boardwalk school and it's net zero, but there's a big brouhaha about citing the backup battery system, and the abutters are very unhappy about noise issues. And that's gotta be more and more of an issue statewide. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so our clean energy and climate plan for 2025 and 2030 does talk about the importance of batteries, and there's a specific target that we're trying to get to in Massachusetts. So I think batteries are a good thing. They're part of this siting and permitting conversation. So we've seen some pretty large scale battery systems that have come before the Department of Public Utilities seeking a zoning and a waiver from the zoning laws. And I think there are some municipalities that have questions about, well, what do we do? So noise has come up. I've also heard about, fire safety issues and making sure there's good knowledge of the local fire departments about what might be required with that. I think that it's just kind of a balancing of, these facilities are absolutely critical to reduce how much infrastructure we're going to need. So if we're generating solar when it's sunny, mostly in the afternoon, and we can store that power for several hours or even multiple days, there are battery technologies that allow for multi-day storage that are, in the near future and some, very close. That's going to be really important. And I think how to handle the impacts of that facility, either during construction or noise, it's a question around how do we get the most robust siting and permitting process to address those issues.
Are they noisy? I think that battery cooling wouldn't be that noisy.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
I don't think they are, but I think that every facility has impacts, and it's important for people who are close, living or working, to be part of conversation so that they understand what those impacts are. And I think there's mitigation that can be done as well to reduce the impacts, noise included.
Go ahead, Arnie.
Okay, Maria Bartlett. Maria?
Hi,
Okay.
I'm not sure if this is a question for you, but maybe you could tell me who. I was on a Heat Smart Alliance meeting last Friday, and there was a president of an organization that represents HVAC contractors in New England. And he was saying how Mass Save is telling people that they have to put in all of their attic insulation before they can have heat pumps installed. And he said that makes it incredibly difficult for the heat pump installers because they have to crawl through all this loose insulation. And he said, that rule really needs to change, and it can be, they can do right size calculations without the insulation in place. So, these are like really important things that are confusing to people and slowing the whole process down. So is this a comment for the energy efficiency plan? Where do these comments need to be made?
It's a great question. So I encourage you to talk to the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, so this is about the energy efficiency plans. The concept is that you don't want to install a heat pump if you have a really leaky building. So if you don't have enough insulation and you're generating heat in the wintertime and it's just going through your leaky windows, that's not energy efficient, and you're generating, you're using more resources than needed. So the concept is to do energy efficiency services before you do the heat pumps. So that's really this.
I understand that, but the contractor's saying that is making it very difficult for them.
Yeah, so I think the contractors, I want to get to you. I do think that the contractors, we don't know everything that they're saying to the public. And when I hear these comments, we all need to be talking to each other. So I think it's good for you to raise it with the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. And I'm glad to know that that's what you're hearing. And again, I think education all around is, we need to do more.
Okay, I can give you the scenario, the order in which things happen. We had to remove all the insulation in the attic, get rid of the knob and tube, put in the heat pumps, and then insulate. Mass Save insulated is the final step after the heat pumps are in. So I don't know what they're saying, since I experienced it just 2 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
mean, the
opposite.
actual steps
What?
of what
That's
happens
the
on what
opposite of what
day.
she said.
I know, but
Yeah.
I went through it, so I know that.
I know, I agree with you, but their Mass Save is telling people something different.
So obviously, there needs to be some more communications and some more information set up at the training level for all the HVAC installers in Massachusetts, some kind of certificate or something. So we trust that you will oversee that with your colleagues and get that done. It is after 1 o'clock. It's just on 1 o'clock. So this has been a great conversation. Maybe in the fall you can come back after things have been moved around and moved up and more confusing than it is now. And but we're gonna keep going to make the community involved in the process with DPU and be a part of that conversation. So thank you all online. Let's give Stacy a big.
Yes, this was great. I really appreciate how involved all of you are and that Elders Climate Action is showing up in so many spaces. I did want to just announce we're doing a series of 4 road shows, we're calling them. So outside of any docket, I don't think the agency's ever done this, where all of the commissioners will come out, we'll introduce ourselves to you, we'll talk about our priorities, and then we'll hear from you on anything that you want to share. So our first one is March 27th at 6 o'clock. It's a hybrid, so you can either join on Zoom or you can come to our offices at 1 South Station. So again, March 27th, 6 p.m., 1 South Station, Boston, or on Zoom.
So you'll send
I'll send it to you so that you can distribute that.
Yeah. And another piece that we didn't get to ask you about, but we just heard announced today that the state has started $1 million climate education media campaign for the next month.
Yes.
And which is something we've been advocating for 2 years. So it's really exciting to see. $1 million is not very much money when it comes to media. Some bus ads, some transit ads, and then it will all stop. So we have to think about funding to make it happen, to continue. But thank you, Stacey.
Who answers these questions?
So online, we are moving on to our next part of the conversation with Third Act. And Seth Evans, you're going to introduce Betty Southwick. And Betty, is Betty on Zoom?
Yes,
Great.
I am.
Betty, thank you for joining us today. I know George Gaines, who's also a member of the Third Act Steering Committee, is going to be chiming in after Betty speaks to us, but just wanted to say that ECA and Third Act have been working together over the last several months to try to see what we can do to support each other and to coordinate our work, since we have similar constituencies. Many of us in this room and on the Zoom room are probably members of both organizations. And we certainly have no proprietary kind of interest when it comes to getting people to sign up for climate action. We just, however many organizations are out there doing it, that's fine. But it is great when we can coordinate our work and where we can support each other. So Betty, I'm going to leave it to you to introduce Third Act to our members. And George, I know that you're out there in space ready to chime in. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. And up front, I just want to say, it says I have an unstable network. So if I go in and out a little bit, I'll be back. I won't be gone long. And also I have a renovation going on in my house. So if you hear saws and hammers and noise, no avail, no problem. I've gotten so used to it, I don't even notice it. So that's part of what the background will be. I thought what I'd do is to say a little bit about the history. Third Act is just 2 years old. It was 2 years ago that Bill McKibben started it. wanted you to I hope you've all heard about the 3 acts that our lives are about, that he based his naming of this new organization. Act 1, we all were out there in the 60s and 70s protesting, fighting for justice, whether it was racial or women's lib or against the Vietnam War. We had passion, we had energy. The second act, we had to get a job. We had to make some money. We had to provide for our families. We had jobs, we had careers. And now in our third act, which Bill claims is after 60, we still have the passion, and we probably have more time and more resources to help in the causes that we care about. So that's where his name came from. And I think 32123 was the first thing that gave us visibility. And I met many of you there. I met Seth there, Tina there, probably others in the room who we were all downtown Boston protesting at that time. And it gave us a way to kind of coalesce people to get going. And we recruited a group of 12 of us who are on the coordinating committee for Third Act Massachusetts. We officially launched our organization in May of 2023. And we celebrated our first birthday in February. So we're a year old as a statewide organization. And we have a lot to learn from ECA because you've been around a lot longer and have a broader spectrum. We now have about 680, I guess, members. So, and we're growing, but we're thrilled to be able to partner with you. We found that partnering is our best mode of action. We don't need to provide our own activities, our own education series. If we can work with others to collaborate on things like that, we can do much more together than we could do individually. So we're happy to be partnering with you. We now have project teams that we've organized, I think similar to what you have. We have an advocacy team that's working on things like Hanscom, wind power on the Cape particularly, democracy, get out the vote, registering voters, things like that, finance and pensions. And I think Tom Rawson is in the group there. I think I saw him on the screen. Yeah, letters to the editor. Those are all project teams that we're working on, as well as getting our communication and infrastructure in place. Last Saturday, we had an all-day retreat and to sort of reflect on our first year and think about where to go in year 2. And what was fun is that it was the first time all 12 of us were in the same room together. Some of us had only seen each other in squares on the Zoom screen. And it was really fun to see that we had some tall people and shorter people, which is all those things that you don't do unless you're in the same room together. So it was a really pleasure for all of us to be able to spend that day together. And I think what we reflected on what we had learned over the year, where we had come over the year. And I think the 2 areas that I think came through as places for year going forward is shifting a bit to democracy, more on democracy and climate change and how to connect the 2 and get voters out who really care about climate, because we all recognize that our democracy is the critical feature of 2024, and that whatever we can do to bring the climate action and democracy forward is what we want to do. So we're doing that. One of the things we've found to be working right now is we've been doing Sunday afternoon postcard events in people's homes. And we had 4 going the first Sunday in March, and one in as far west as Williamstown, Ashfield, Belmont, all across the state. And what we're finding is they are building community. People have said, I want to find other Third Act members. I want to not feel like I'm by myself. I want to have more people in my circle. And by pulling these little postcard events together, that's getting some energy and initiative. And I think what we're finding is hope and energy and doing something get people going and get people ready for action. So we hope to continue. We're going to do those every Sunday, every month, first Sunday of the month, and expand to as many different communities as we can. So it's just a place where we've seen some reactions and energy. And so we want to build on that. We're also going to do some phone banking in the same way. The other shift is not a shift so much, but is pushing on environmental justice communities and working hand in hand with Green Roots in Chelsea and ACE in Roxbury and BCAN, Boston's Green New Deal, trying to work hand in hand with some of those local organizations who are working on justice issues in their community. So I think those are two new areas that we will highlight going forward. George just put a note in the chat that he was having such trouble with his internet that he said, I can't get any words in and I can't follow it. So he's not going to join me. But Tom's here and Rick Johnson, I saw on Zoom, are both coordinating committee members with me. So they're here. You can ask them questions as well. So that's sort of the overview, Seth. Is that, if there's more you want me to talk about, I will.
Yeah, Betty, that's great. Thank you very much. We're getting near our time limit for this, but if there are questions, should we direct them to Tom here in the room? Or you?
Either, it doesn't matter, yeah.
Okay, so where do you have time for 1 or 2 questions?
Any questions, Ernie?
Hi, it's Lana. I have a question. I just put my hand up a little late.
Go for it.
Can I ask? Okay, great. Thanks, Betty, for being here, and I'm a member of Third Act, but haven't gotten too directly involved, just sort of reading Bill's posts, etc. But my question is this, and it actually came up in the time with Stacy Rubin. Were you on during that conversation with Stacy? And
Part of the time.
So the question came up about the tension between the need to move faster and the issue of community involvement in decision making around siting, for example, and permitting. I think we have an issue around NIMBYism. I think that there are two, at least broadly speaking, two broad categories. One is legitimate issues, and I do agree that with Stacy that getting the community involved up front before a proposal is developed, and also talking about community benefits are two key pieces, and having community benefits that are concrete, and then those are two pieces that I think are really important in moving forward. But then there's the issue of the disinformation campaign that's out there that's apparently has been pretty effective, as we've seen with the offshore wind industry, very effective in mobilizing people who commit, and basically they start spreading misinformation. So how does Third Act, what are your thoughts about Third Act? Have you discussed that at all?
We have 2 things I'll mention is that tomorrow night we're hosting information about the dark money that's gone into the offshore wind stuff down in the Cape. So we have some people from Brown University talking about that. So yes, that's right. So he's going to be speaking. So yes, we've talked about that in that sense. And I think it's educating the public about that disinformation is the one thing that we can do. And the other, I'll talk about the siting. John Walke at Green Roots in Chelsea spoke at the Environmental Justice Legislative Table, I don't know, maybe in January at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And they really are on top of this siting issue. And they're really pushing the state legislators to get the community involved up front so that you actually save time in the end if you get the community on board in the beginning. And we've said to John, whatever we can do to support your efforts, whether it's legislative, going to the State House, writing letters or whatever, we're there with you to try to help make everyone understand that that's what they need to do. Get the community involved, but do it up front. So those are the two areas that I know we're sort of aware of and trying to think through with others, with other partners.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that good question, Lana, and thank you, Betty. And we look forward to our further collaboration, doing great work. Thank you so much.
Seth, we've got one other question, or Alan, do you have time for one more question?
Just, we have about 1 minute, Alan, if
Okay.
you can do that.
Yeah, the quick question is, what do the postcards say?
Vote. Get out and vote. Remind them, like Environmental Voter Project will say, thanks for being a good voter. We want you to remember the voting date is March, da-da-da-da, here's where you go, da-da-da-da, here's how you get information. They're basically saying vote.
Okay.
Some of the letters to Pennsylvania, getting their young people registered.
All right. That's a perfect segue to our next speaker. And I'm really pleased to say that we have Paul Dreyfus with us today. When I first joined Elders Climate Action several years ago, Paul was on the leadership team. He since has moved on to, I wouldn't say greener, but perhaps different pastures. And it has been a founder and now an active leader in a group called Elders for Sound Democracy. They are our sister or brother organization within the larger Elders Action Network organization that we're all a part of. I'm not going to go into detail about how that all hangs together, but Paul is here today to introduce us to Elders for Sound Democracy and what we all can do and should be doing to make sure that we get what we want out of our election for the climate. So Paul, go ahead, and we're going to follow this up with some breakout groups to process what Paul said and talk about where we are all individually headed in dealing with the election that's coming up. Take it, Paul.
Thank you so much, and so great to be here today. This Massachusetts ECA chapter has been really an important part of my education as an activist. We started out in about the years kind of run together a little bit, about 2016, and we met Nathaniel Stinnett in 2017 and realized that he was onto something, and that Environmental Voter Project was onto something, and that we could be useful. So we recruited in that first year 75 volunteers, and by 2020 we had expanded our Promote the Vote program with Elders Climate Action from a Massachusetts initiative to a national initiative. And through the 2020 election, our volunteers grew to a list of about 500 nationally, and we were able to contact more than 2 million voters and activate tens of thousands of voters who had been poor voters turned into regular voters, the Environmental Voter Project model. So that was just the first example of how this chapter has provided leadership and energy to the voter empowerment work that we all recognize as so critical, whatever our policy goals are, that the voters have to have an opportunity to choose their government, and that we and many other organizations need to be a part of that. And we've been working side by side with Third Act, with Common Cause, with League of Women Voters, a lot of organizations that are represented in this room. I'm going to pop into a slide presentation in a moment so that I don't kind of get lost in the rhetoric here. But I did want to recognize Michael Sales, who's in the room, who has been part of this leadership team and is now part of the national leadership team for Elders for Sound Democracy. And our leadership model is very much modeled after leadership model of this chapter is about 10 or 12 people who meet every Monday morning from all walks of life, all highly committed and all with unique skill set that we've woven into an ability to make things happen, we hope, but we need a lot more. We need a lot more help with that. So you will be hearing from Michael in this presentation as well about some really important work that he is leading. But let me see if I can screen share now and pop into that.
And just let me remind you, Paul, that we have a limited viewing of slides here. We because of a technical glitch. We don't have a projector. We've got one laptop that people are trying to take a look at. So just make sure you go through the slides so that folks understand them if they don't have the visual.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We will clean up the slides after the meeting because they were put together, you know, in a bit of a hurry, as things tend to be, and then we will distribute the slide. We'll work with you to distribute the slides and some other materials after the meeting. So if you miss something, you know, we will get that information to you. So starting the slideshow, could somebody let me know if you can see my presentation?
We can see it on Zoom here.
Yep, we see it.
Yep, in the
Right.
room we can see.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last comment.
Yes, Paul, we can see it in the
Great,
room. We're all
excellent.
on the
All right,
laptop.
so on this slide, I would just like folks to jot down my email address so that if all other pathways fail, you can just drop me an email. Okay, that's it. Have a nice day. No. Just a little bit of history. We are all part of the Elders Action Network, which is an umbrella organization with about 20,000 members nationally and internationally. And, you know, our mission is to build a movement of elders to address the environmental, governance, and social issues of our time. That's our broad mission. We have two I would say preeminent programs. Elders Climate Action is our largest, oldest, and most active program. Elders for Sound Democracy is our second very focused program with very clear activist goals. And then we have a whole array of social justice programs, reading groups, civic education teams, a lot of really great activities. But one thing that we all realize is that whatever our policy goals are, we all need to make sure that this next election is one in which the voters have the opportunity to choose their government. So organizationally, we have state teams and mostly ECA chapters in you know, a dozen or so states, and then we're also organizing mostly around voting rights in additional states, Georgia Pacific, Georgia Pacific. There I am naming railroads. Georgia, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. We hope that we can get teams going in those states, and more about that later. So just a minute to reflect on what's happening, because these times are not normal and this election is not normal. You know, we all get deluged with these headlines every day, and it just gets, it seems to get worse and worse and worse and more intense. And now we have a major party presumptive presidential candidate saying that he would choose to rule as a dictator. So things are pretty bad. So so what is the impact of this bombardment of scary information and information about you know, extreme authoritarian things that are happening day by day? Well, what happens is that we all kind of get like this. So either you get like this because you believe the propaganda that transgender people are grooming your children, or you get like this because you realize that there's propaganda out there that's making people believe that. And it all has a political purpose. So how do we get from there to being able to actually work on behalf of a free and fair election. Well, we've got to reflect on the fact that there's a panoply of reasons that this is there's no roadmap for where we are right now. We have this overt fascism that we confront every day. We have climate weirding everywhere, so that's on everybody's radar. We have what I would call AI weaponized social media. So, we've had a problem with social media and biased media for a long time, but now it seems like it is becoming more highly weaponized and more dangerous, and it's going to be more difficult to walk back. Then we have geopolitical tension, and we could talk the whole hour about that. And then we have what I would call Darth Vader billionaires. Maybe some of them started out as nice guys, but then, you have examples of them being very deliberate purveyors of dangerous propaganda. So we have that to deal with. But on the other side, we are in a post-Dobbs world where public sentiment against the government constraining basic human rights is very, very strong, and we can cite many examples of the power of that to be a vote driver, and we'll get into that again. We'll get into that a little bit as we go along. So, how do we look at this and not do this? We have to look at what our opportunities are and just really, really try to focus on, where we have leverage, where there are what we're calling a new American majority that could potentially secure a victory from authoritarianism. So what we've observed in 2022 and 23 that's pretty hopeful is there never was really a red wave, and that younger voters and female voters came out in very, very strong numbers in Kansas, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, and elsewhere to vote for women's rights, especially for women's rights. But environmental action, economic justice are certainly on the radar as well. Also, the survival of democracy became a palpable issue, and we saw the way that President Biden framed the State of the Union around the very survival of democracy, and that there are many, many groups out there that are gaining a great deal of experience and sophistication in activating some of what we're calling the new American majority voters. So where does that bring us? Well, when we say the new American majority, what are we talking about? And there are some papers and statistics on this. I couldn't find anything that came right up to 2023, 2024, but essentially our target groups are going to be young people, and we'll come back to some of these groups and talk about really how we see the opportunity, what the numbers are telling us. Young people, people of color, women, especially unmarried women, environmentalists, and what we're broadly calling social and economic justice voters. So this is the new American majority, and what some of the papers would tell you is that this is 53% of the electorate and growing. Not of the people who vote, of the people who are eligible to vote. And this is basically what's behind the vote suppression, is that the folks who want to run things a certain way don't want these groups voting, and that's what the vote suppression is about. So our hopeful premise is that the voters are out there who want to do the right thing, and if we allow them to vote and support them voting and empower them, they will do the right thing, and we believe we can do something about that. So we'll start out with young voters. This is really I don't know if folks can see this on the small screen in the room, but what this is basically saying is that the number of youth who turned 18 between 2020 and 2024, let's take Pennsylvania for an example, the margin of victory in 2020 presidential election was 82,000 votes. 620,000 young people will become eligible to vote. between then and the 2024 election. Similarly, in Arizona, Michigan, you could go right down the purple states and see this phenomenon. So what does this mean? Well, nationally, these slides were cadged from Laura Brill, who is the founder of the Civic Center, which has kind of cracked the code of how to increase youth voter registration by working with school leaders, parent groups, and especially student groups to organize voter registration drives within their schools, and especially associated with high school graduation. The reason this is important is that overall, about 23% of 18 to 20-year-olds are registered to vote. But, and here's the big hopeful but, of those who are registered, 86% voted in the last presidential election. So what we see in terms of registration rates is that youth registration is low, but it goes up in presidential election years. But it's still far, even at its highest, it's still far below all the other groups. So, and one other thing that we know is that historically, over the last few cycles, that the 18 to 25 vote has been about 70% blue. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, all the base constituencies on both sides are all shifting around now. And so we know that there's something going on with young men, that they tend to be going a little more conservative. Something's going on with young women. They tend to be going more progressive. So we're going to have to watch the trends very, very carefully. But overall, younger voters are good voters and part of our new American majority. So where are we here? Oh yeah, so this is just over the last few cycles, the percentage of voters who did get registered who actually voted in each of these cycles. So that's very hopeful. And when we get into the kind of what we're going to do about it, we'll talk about our partnership with the Civic Center and what we think we can do around the youth vote. Then we move on to the environmental voter opportunity. And, if you were at the last deep dialogue with Nathaniel Stinnett, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But, Environmental Voter Project started out with, I think the number was 10 or 15 million of strong environmentalists who were not regular voters. And now cumulatively, they believe that this is the number of voters who could be turned into regular voters as time progresses. So drilling down a little bit, if we look at these 6 key purple states, we can see that the number in the third column, non-voting environmentalists, the number of non-voting environmentalists, again, is far above in most of these states the margin of victory in the 2020 election. So turning out more environmental voters to the extent that we can do a good job with this, we can affect the margin in some key states. So we will definitely be continuing with this. And again, I'll get back to kind of the specifics of how we're approaching it a little bit later. Now, this is just an example of the great data that we're able to get from the Environmental Voter Project. That here we have a breakdown of Florida that shows us where the environmental voters are. So this is just one piece of data, and in a minute, I'm going to ask Michael Sales to jump in and talk about our hot button analysis methodology. But this is just an example of some data that we might use. Like here we can see that up in Duval County, where Jacksonville, Florida is, there are somewhere between 25,000 and 35,000 target environmental voters. We also know in that county that because reproductive rights is on the ballot in Florida, that there are about 30,000 people in that county who have signed the petition to have reproductive rights on the ballot. So we're beginning to collect targeting data state by state in the states in which we're active, so that we can engage in some of the high impact practices of making sure that target voters have multiple messages urging them to the polls and providing them with actionable information to counteract the intentional voter suppression that's going on in this state and many other states. So I'm going to ask Michael, if you would speak to this slide.
Sure, I'll try to do so, Paul. Thank you so much.
Together.
Thank you so much. And Paul, I think you're probably going to come to this at some point, but I do want to say that what Paul is running through here is that Elders for Sound Democracy is active on a whole variety of fronts. And one of the things that we need is people working with us on this critical election. So I think Paul's going to talk about, we have a whole portfolio of jobs and roles that need to be filled. And Paul probably is going to say something about that, but I'm giving you a preview of that. Okay, so hot button action teams. There are 35 congressional districts in the United States that I think in 2022 were decided by a margin of 2% or less of the voting public. And the hot button action team focuses on congressional districts like that, and specifically on precincts within those congressional districts where turnout was much lower than the average for the totality of the precincts across that district. So I've been doing quite a bit of work with a team in the Arizona 6 district. And Arizona 6 had two competitors. One was an environmental lawyer who worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, and the other was someone who has declined to say that the 2020 election was a free and fair election. The person who declined to say that the 2020 election was free and fair won by 5,300 votes out of something like 325,000 votes cast, a margin of, I think, 1.5%. And so what we're looking at with this hot button team that's been created in Arizona, and the word hot button refers to what is it that's in these particular congressional districts that people are truly passionate about. So in Arizona 6, there are huge issues around water. Arizona 6 has a border with Mexico, a pretty good sized border with Mexico. There are big issues around border tensions and what happens to the people who cross the border. There are also, sorry about that. There are also issues involving white supremacy and intimidation of people on the basis of their race, stuff like that. And so the work of a hot button team is to first get a generalized sense of what the driving issues, the compelling questions are in one of these congressional districts. And to do that by looking at talking to thought leaders, talking with activists, journalists, influencers, reading the news. And it's a pretty disciplined process if it's engaged in a rigorous fashion. And at the same time, we're looking for where have people not voted? So where Tucson is located is a place called Pima County, Arizona. And Pima County has got, I think it's like 225 different precincts. And they're about, I'd say, a third of those precincts where less than 50% of the possible voters have turned out. And in a number of those precincts, only 20, 25, 30% of the people have turned out. Why? Why is that the case? And so the objective of the ultimate objective of the hot button team work is to find local activists who are supporters of strong democracy and sound democracy. And one of the ways to do that is to look at the way in which people vote in a precinct on propositions which are clearly connected to either sound democracy or in opposition to sound democracy. So Arizona had a proposition, statewide proposition, that would have made it very increasingly difficult for people to vote. And that proposition was defeated, and it was defeated very narrowly by maybe 2 or 3%. And in a number of these poor performing precincts that we've identified, the people who did vote voted against these voter suppression efforts. So those people who are relatively rare in their precincts because they vote, they know what they're doing. So it's like to get in touch with those people who would like to see more people in their precinct turn out, and then work with them on what are they currently doing and how might an organization such as ESD help them. And that's it in a nutshell. And I'm glad to take any questions. Go ahead. Bob.
Thank you, Michael. And the hot button action teams are really, becoming one of the key foundational activities for us, because they're allowing us to get much more informed about what messages and are relevant, who our allies are, how to reach and make an impression on our target voters. So, but we could do a whole session just on this, and Michael has developed a draft manual for this, and, so stay tuned. This is going to be really interesting. Okay, so just a little bit on messaging, because we do pay a lot of attention to messaging discipline, and I do just want to mention that we're having a world-class expert on issue messaging, Anat Shenker Osario, who's going to speak at a national Get Out the Vote town hall, Elders for Sound Democracy town hall on April 17th at 1 p.m. And we will make sure to provide you with a registration link for that. But, this is just, I don't want to really go through this, but just to make the point about how seriously we take this. And before we put a message out, we go through a whole disciplined process, and we have a communications team that pays a lot of attention to this, and also is another example of an activity that needs your help. So, at this point, I had planned a breakout for a discussion here. Given that it's already 1:45, maybe we should forego this. Roger, anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. I think if you guys are done, maybe we can take some questions and then open it up for.
We're not done, unfortunately, but we dropped this in the middle.
Yeah, we carry on. Let's try to leave if we can. 10 minutes for some questions and discussion.
So let's just move ahead, but please keep this question in mind, because to sustain this activity, we have to really think about what's in it for us. What is it? What button is it pushing for us? And I know for me personally, I'm very wrapped around the values. I feel like there's a shared set of values here, that we have a clear purpose, get out the vote among the new American majority, that we're cognizant of the experience, that we like working together, that we are very mindful of doing activities that are sustainable and high impact and collaborative, and that we're very concerned about accomplishment. We, at the end of the day, at the end of the cycle, we want to be able to look back and say, yeah, we did turn out 50,000 voters or whatever the number is. We did do something that may have affected the margin in a particular contest. So just please think about that for yourselves when you think about how you might engage over the next 10 months. So here's kind of a little rundown on what we're actually doing. Just a little bit of history. I mentioned that this all really started with the Massachusetts chapter, and the Massachusetts chapter has continued to be a font of leadership and expertise. I could name some highlights of that. Sharon Brownfield, who's been active in this chapter, was the co-leader of the Pennsylvania voting rights team in 2020. Grady McGonigal has been very active with Environmental Voter Project and with the Arizona team right along. Two people who are from the Boston area, Elizabeth Vernon and Deborah Cantor, were co-leaders of the Florida team in 2020, and basically were our most probably our most amazing innovators. They came up with the idea of going after public service announcements, networking with community colleges, networking with congregations of faith. So just a lot of our innovations have come out of this chapter. I just want to make that point. So our plans for 2024 is we are emphasizing state teams because we've learned that, as Michael implied in the hot button analysis, we really can't message effectively unless we're very, very close to the ground. And I believe that all our key innovations have come from state and local teams, not from those of us who meet nationally every week. Although I think we serve a function, but the innovation is really coming from the grassroots, where people better understand the dynamics and better understand their voters. We're very committed to young voter registration, and we have a whole program for that. We piloted that with the Civic Center in September, October 2023, and quickly put together a team of about 40 people who reached out to 200 high schools, a list that was provided to us by the Civic Center through their targeting methodology. And, so we were able to contact 200 high schools in short order, but there are 20,000 high schools in the United States. So there's a lot more work to do there. And we were really trying to ramp that up. And then we've already talked about Promote the Vote, the Environmental Voter Project work, the hot button analysis, and collaboration is very, very important. We have collaborations on the ground with Third Act in Arizona and Florida, and we're discussing it in Georgia and elsewhere. And, we are very, very interested in these functional collaborations where we can get synergies and we can be more powerful working together. So we're always looking for suggestions and folks who have contacts in other organizations so we can have those conversations. So now we get into the roles. This is where we're asking for your help, that in the state teams, well, this is just kind of nitty gritty. Some of the tasks that need to be done at the state level, and trying to hurry things along here. So our pitch is that we need a lot of people to make a 5 to 10 hour per month commitment, that we do believe that this is world-changing work. And the 5 to 10 hours came out of the team that reached out to the 200 high schools in September. Those were folks who had committed to 5 to 10 hours per month, But right now, we need folks who have some organizational inclinations to work with us on organizing some of these hot button teams and some of these functional teams. We're hoping that this does seem like a worthwhile opportunity to you. And this is just an example of some of the skill sets. And, you know, if we have volunteers who have skill sets that make a huge difference. We had somebody come along who has a human resources background, and the good news is that we've just hired a halftime coordinator, Melanie Nowlin, to work with Elders for Sound Democracy. She has a very strong background, both in voter registration in South Carolina and in social media. We also have a new halftime hire in ECA, specifically to work on expanding the Environmental Voter Project work. That's Pam Vergun. Very, very good people, and that's a new step forward for us to have that kind of dedicated staff. These are some of the teams that need your help. I'm not going to ask you to make note of the specific contact people. We'll get that information to you in due course. And then got to always end with the inspirational slide. And here it is. So I'm going to stop the share and hope that we have a few minutes for comments and questions. And also one of the suggestions that was made in the breakout was, could we identify a small group that would work with Elders for Sound Democracy to get things organized so that your chapter can work in a focused way. One example is that there may be an opportunity for a chapter to actually initiate a weekly phone bank for environmental voters. So that's something that 2 or 3 people could probably take on. It'd probably be a bit much for one person to take on. So we just really want to start the dialogue about how we can all work together to make sure that the voters get to choose their government this time around. So I'm going to stop the share and Brett.
Okay, Paul, thank you so much. That's a lot of information. You guys are doing really extraordinary work. I'm very impressed with that. Let me just kick this off with one quick question about, here we are in Massachusetts. We kind of know the outcome of the election here. And I expect that as you're working in Florida and some other key states, Arizona, what do we do? How do we play a role in Massachusetts when you're saying that it makes perfect sense that the real innovative work is on the ground in those districts where people are living? How do we support them? And is that what you're asking us to do?
Yes, we need a presence on the ground so that we have a feel for the state and we develop our in-state network. But then a lot of organizing activities can be done remotely. The targeting information that I was able to obtain for the reproductive rights referendum in Florida, I just got that online. So somebody could work with Michael being the hot button analyst for Florida. They don't have to be in Florida, but we do need people on the ground, and we are building out that network. That's just an example of an opportunity. And, we're also developing like a national communications team. So if somebody has that skill set or that inclination, your work would be very much needed there. And then maybe somebody, has an idea about something that we haven't thought of yet. So we'll have that conversation and then go from there. So it's just really, connect and commit. And that I will say that has been probably one of our greatest challenges at this point, is keeping up with getting folks plugged into these roles, and we're getting a capacity to do that, but that has been a struggle for us over the last few months. But don't let that hold you back. We'll get on top of that. So, but again, if we could identify a small coordinating team that we could work with, Roger, I think we could really make it happen from there.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like from perspective of our organization right now, that would be key. Folks who are willing to stay in touch with you, go to the regular meetings, identify these opportunities, get the word out to our chapter and organize some activities and help plug people in. That's where the need is right now.
But focusing on Massachusetts, Roger?
I hear that we're focusing on the swing states, but we're
Yes.
supporting people who are on the ground there. But we as a chapter can stay in touch with Paul and his group to make that connection. What intrigues me and attracts me to this is the potential for actually having a relationship with a small team in Florida or Arizona where the folks are on the ground and I get to help them out in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's going to be phone banking, maybe it's going to be card writing, maybe it's going to be communications or research, but that is very attractive and different from anything else I've seen on the offerings for us to be engaged in electoral work.
Let
So
me just give a real life example of kind of the carpetbagger effect. Probably a very, very wrong choice of words for this, but one of our volunteer leaders, Joff Baker, who lives in Half Moon Bay, California, realized with the senatorial runoff election in Georgia that we didn't really have a capacity to have an impact in Georgia. So without a single member on the ground in Georgia, he and 3 other volunteers set up a Get Out the Vote, a Georgia Get Out the Vote team that collaborated with the New Georgia Project, which is the kind of leading human rights C3 in Georgia. Stacey Abrams was part of the founding of it, and worked out an arrangement where they felt they had the capacity to reach elders through through senior centers, but not through senior housing. So we contracted with them, not contracted, but agreed that we would take on the task of contacting every subsidized senior housing facility in Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia, and make sure that their residents had access to how to vote information. They organized that whole thing on the ground without ever setting foot in Georgia. They actually, they're overachievers. They set up a Dropbox so that they could get mail in Georgia and the whole work. So with that kind of motivation, and they had an impact, and they achieved their goal. They contacted and provided information to every subsidized housing project in the city of Atlanta, at least all those that answered their phones. So that's just a kind of extreme example of what you can do without anyone on the ground. We're very much moving away from that model. We want people on the ground, but there's lots that can be done remotely as well.
Right. So we have one question in the room here. Yes.
A quick response to what you were asking and a question. Okay. My quick response is you might want to talk, as someone who's on the Third Act Coordinating Committee, talk to Meg and the other people on the democracy team, because they're doing at least some of what you're talking about, particularly around Get Out the Vote. Okay. That's been the focus.
I'm sorry, who is that?
I'm talking about the democracy team at Third Act in Massachusetts, which is doing something very similar. And I gather from your comments that there's a lot of interaction with Third Act in other places too.
Yes, and so far it's been very positive, and in the 2 states where it's moving along, it's been really positive, and I could see it that something we'd want to do in Massachusetts as well.
My question is a messaging question, which is I've seen a lot of conversation that's come up recently. I can't remember where the quote originally comes from about, voting being public transport, not marriage. That you're looking for the bus that's going closest to your destination, not for a perfect relationship. And I'm wondering if there's places where that message resonates with people because there tends to be this hyper partisanship that says, I want perfect on one side or the other.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is it's going to be a choice election. And that's why I boldface post Dobbs, is because what we're seeing in the hopeful dynamic in voter behavior is that it's a choice election around, do you want a government that's going to infringe your reproductive rights? There are lots of other salient issues, but that's the one that seems to be driving votes in a non-MAGA direction in a lot of different places. So I'm not sure if that's responsive to your question.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I was thinking.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, but it's very complicated, and voter behavior is extremely volatile right now, what we're seeing in surveys. So this is all the more reason we need the hot button. We need to get really close to the voter, closer than we're accustomed to being. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it. Michael Sales has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ronnie. Yeah, just to hop in on this for a second, it's like there are so many things that you don't have to be on the ground to support those people on the ground. Just one thing is like we got these people in Arizona. I think there are like 4 or 5 of them that are working on it consistently, and just to have them here, like from 5 of you or 6 of you at this meeting. And for them to get an email, we heard about this work that you're doing. Thank you for that. Here's how to be in touch with us. Give us a shout if there's something that you think that we could do that might help you. And I'll just give you a quick example of that. We could use a database of thought leaders, journalists, activists in these low voter turnout precincts in the hot button districts, and that for people you could be in Massachusetts and be helping us compile that and putting that in front of the members of the hot button team and saying, boy, if you guys were in touch with these folks, we would really like to know the results of what happened in your conversations with them, to let the people who are on the ground know that people nationally care about them.
Great. Well, we are a little over time here. What I would suggest, if there's anybody on Zoom who has any interest in exploring this relationship further with Elders for Sound Democracy and our Third Act colleagues here in Massachusetts, if you would just put your name and email in the chat, and if there's anybody here in the room, you can check in with us if you're interested. No commitment, just to further explore the possibility of getting more engaged around this. So I think we need to thank Paul and Michael for an excellent presentation. And we're going to be signing off. I guess, Paul, if you wanted to stick around, if anybody on Zoom wants to stick around, and Arnie can keep it open, that's really up to you guys. But we'll call an official end here and say farewell to all.
Good to see everybody. I've got to go to another meeting. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, folks. Alan, is Alan still here? Alan Fierce? Alan has a question or comment in the chat, and I just wanted to just address that for a second, Alan, because that is kind of a key question: is what can nonpartisan organizations do, and what can partisan organizations do? They have very different approaches. Partisan organizations look at their frequent voters who vote in their direction and go after them. We more indirect approach.
I was on Massachusetts.
Sorry.
And I'll pass it over to Pam, but before I do,
Roger, could you mute so I could talk to Alan?
on your indicators, on your identification, because that's actually Pam and I met a couple of years ago.
Hey, guys, we're hearing all the background noise. Okay.
Can
we tell those folks to speak more quietly?
Yeah,
Yeah, super small world. So happy to meet you all. Sam Williams is a superpower. I'm actually only 2 months at the company so far.
Wow.
I was in the environmental community for 10 years, so it's really great to hear
Alan, I'll email you.
Yeah.
all of your organizations.
Okay.
Oh, but I have a question
But
too.
I can be
Uh,
very
Say
welcome.
it loud.
People in the room hear us?
Yeah.
Can we ask them to lower their voices?
And I'll just say that all of the Berkshire folks are
Wow.
from Massachusetts, originally from Barrington, Barrington.
Marty, can you figure out how to?
Yeah,
There we
sorry,
go.
folks, I cannot. Go ahead.
Well, just who's in the room? Alan, Paul, did you finish talking to Alan or, because I,
No, I didn't. No, not really. No.
okay,
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that we can do is we can work with different institutions. A partisan organization cannot work with a community college. A partisan organization cannot, well, is not supposed to work with a congregation. We all know the other side does it all the time. But there are certain things that we can do. We can't, a partisan organization can't get into a high school. We can get into a high school. So we're working those areas. It's kind of both sides of the coin have to happen. You have to go after your likely voters, but we also need to bring more voters into the likely category, and that's kind of what the Environmental Voter Project does. It's not perfect, but if you look at some of the crosstabs between environmental voters and some of our other target groups, like I just looked at Florida recently, and non-white, young, Asian, so on and so forth. There's a lot of crossover between the environmental voters and some of these other groups. So yeah, it's not perfect in terms of targeting, but it's something that we feel needs to be done. And we're a C3, so we don't have a choice. We have to approach it that way.
so Alan, and this is in support of your question, because I think it's a really key question, but I think it's getting to more the issue of EVP, which I've been, following since its inception in Massachusetts, and I think it's a great organization. But their secret sauce was that they could identify, based on the info that Nathaniel was collecting, which voters seemed to care about the environment. It was a very in that way, it was a targeted group. So you're saying that you have evidence that there is crossover between these other groups. I'm just worried about that too. I guess potentially one could work in both groups, both the partisan and the nonpartisan, because I agree that things are.
We should all do that.
Okay.
It's not an either or. That I personally,
is.
that, and we, I would suggest that it's important to do both. Yeah.
But if you only have some volunteer, do the nonpartisan, because no environmentalist is going to vote for Trump. And the people that matter are the non-Democrats and the non-Republicans. It's the largest group. You can't get access to them as a Democrat. They just leave out the non-voters or the ones that a partisan Democratic one is not as effective as this is in turning out the voters that matter.
It's different voters that are being reached, and I agree with you. Both are important. Just to reflect on kind of the targeting dynamic with our high school work. We're not going out after high schools in 70% red districts. There's a targeting algorithm so that you don't know how the kids who get registered in a high school drive are going to vote, but we know overall they're going to vote 70% blue. And by geographic targeting, we can get better than that. So that's, and again, that gets back to kind of the hot button analysis, that we need to really, really understand the turf that we're working, perhaps better than a partisan campaign, because they have the shortcut of, who voted blue 2 out of the last 3 elections. Okay, we're hitting them up. So anyway, that's kind of where we've come down on that. We do feel that we've found high impact voter empowerment work that is highly targeted and that we can do as a C3, and that's kind of the space we live in.
Can also go to churches.
Churches are going to be an important part of that. Yep.
And we can also go, yeah. The environmental turnout, partisan groups only go to potential voters. These groups can turn non-voters into voters.
And we know certainly with young voters, that's the challenge. We have to get them registered.
Yeah.
Once they register, so you have to look at what is the historical behavior of each group. And so that we know doing get out the vote on young voters isn't going to do much if only 29% of them are registered. So that's why we're focusing on registration. And so one screen is it needed? Yes, it's needed, the voter registration. The second screen is, do we have a methodology that works? And that's where our partnership with the Civic Center, which has done this for 10 years and done a lot of evaluation research on it. And so they know what they can do. They know if they get into a school that they can get the registration rate up from 25% to 60, 70%. So we try to go with models that have proven themselves in solid evaluations. And EVP, we believe passes muster on that. And now we're developing other areas as well.
I'm going to stop the recording now. I'll leave the meeting open. But Paul, it's great to see you again. And
yeah, great to see you, Arnie. And you guys, I just hope you can identify a small group, and I'm going to put together materials to send you for, and you can, send them to the attendees or the whole chapter or whatever you want to do with them. But I'll send the deck. It's going to be a few days because I want to run the deck by our communications committee because we're trying to deal with some consistency issues there. But let's say by the end of the week, by Thursday, Friday, I'm going to send Roger an email with that finished document with a jobs bulletin that's going to get into more details on the that we need done, and maybe some others. But
Paul, if you forward that to me, we'll post it along with the video on the website.
Right.
Okay.
Very good. Thank